I'm poor. Recently I was just at the immigration department on Tuesday because we were sponsoring one of the monks for permanent residence, and our nomination got rejected. You know why? Because we weren't paying him enough. Oh my goodness. Because apparently there's a gazetted salary, and if you're nominating someone for a religious worker visa and you don't meet their salary package, then they get rejected. So we're going to fight this. It's one of those things we have to do. Because they don't realise that monks and nuns are poor. And we're meant to be poor. We enjoy being poor. I will fight for my right to be poor. It's sometimes great. Remember when I first applied for a healthcare card, because you're below the poverty line, you can have one of these healthcare cards, which means the doctor will bulk bill. And you get this letter back from the Social Security Department. Can you please explain how you survive? Or nothing. Because you got all these forms, and the forms said, like, how much do you earn from your work? Nil. How much do you earn from investments? Nil. How much do you earn from rental property? Nil. How many savings have you got? Nil. It's all nil, 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 nil. It's a very easy sum to add up. So what's your monthly income? Nil. And for the first time when the Social Security got to know monks, that really messed them up. So I had great fun being poor. And it's not being poor is the problem, it's how you're poor. It's the same with everything else in life. It's the how, not the what. So the decisions you make in life, never be so concerned about what the outcome of those decisions are, but how you make those decisions. It's the how which is most important. And if you know how to make decisions, that will always create happiness for you in life. The outcomes are not so important, but the how actually is. If you get the how right, yeah, you make money or you lose money. Yeah, if you lose money, you can always make some more. And if you really get bankrupt, we've always got monasteries you can go and hide out in from the creditors. There's always something you can do with no matter what happens. And sometimes you make decisions and you get very sick. And sometimes, as I mentioned here, sometimes sickness is a great blessing. Many, many times. I was down at the Cancer Support Association a couple of weeks ago, giving another talk down there. So often I meet the same thing with the people who've had cancer. On the other side of the cancer, once they're in remission, they say that was the best thing which ever happened to them. I don't know how many times I've heard that. So even those things, you make a wrong decision, you get this disease. It's something wonderful happens if you know the how, not the what. In the same way, it doesn't matter who your partner is. It's not the what, but how you relate to them. That's the essence of a marriage. It's even when you meditate, it's not what you're experiencing, but how you're experiencing. And that's the trick of meditation. You can have a crazy mind, you have a sleeping mind. It's not so important as how do you relate to that? Are you making peace with it, or are you fighting? Have you got ill will? Are you afraid of things? It's not the what, but the how is the most important thing. One of the questions, again, just going back to the talk at Christchurch, they say, is it okay for a Buddhist to be violent? Suppose that someone was being violent to you. Could you fight back? Or rather, should you fight back? A great question, because that's one of the nice reasons I like going to schools, because the kids there, that they've got the guts to ask tough questions. It's very rare I get tough questions from you guys. You're not rebellious enough. Well, I told them this story that, is it okay to use violence as a Buddhist? So it's much better, I said, to run. But if you're a monk, you can't run. If you ever try running in these robes, you find they all fall off. All of them. And there's nothing underneath. So you can't run. But I remember here, this is actually how Buddhists deal with violence. This is a true story. I told this to the kids and they were very impressed. When we first came to this suburb, when we first opened this centre here, it was about 20 years ago now. Forget exactly when, maybe 23 years ago. This hall wasn't built yet. We had the community hall next door. And we just moved into this new centre. So we had an opening ceremony. And we thought we would never know your luck. We invited the then Governor of Western Australia, Sir Gordon Reid. The Reid Highway is named after him. And just to our delight, he accepted. We never thought the Governor would accept to come to a small place like this, but he accepted and he came. We were just so thrilled. And even though we were struggling for support, nevertheless, this was going to be a big day. So our treasurer at the time told me, look, we want to make a really good show of it. My job, my little piece of the action there was to order the marquee and the chairs. For the marquee outside and the chairs for our people and our guests. And so, because I was told by the treasurer, it didn't matter how much it cost, we want the very best. I'd rang around for the top hire company in Perth. I got one in Cottesloe, which hired out the marquees, for Peppermint Grove and Dalkeith. And I said, look, we're going to get the Governor. We really want to put a show. Buddhists have come to town. We want to show we're here. We don't want to put sort of, a small thing on. We want to impress people. So can I have a really nice marquee and some really good chairs? We've got the Governor of the state coming. And so the lady who took the call said, yes, it will cost you. I said, doesn't matter. Treasurer said we want to put on a good show. Okay, the deal was made. On a Friday afternoon, Friday afternoon, because we're going to have the ceremony on the Sunday. So we had to set up on a Friday before people stopped working. The Friday afternoon, when the truck came with the marquee and the chairs, I was a kind monk. I was helping someone else with their jobs, so I never actually saw them unload. But when they checked, the marquee which they had was absolutely filthy. Had all this red dust. It had probably been on some agricultural show. And I was very upset because I asked for something good. But, instead of complaining, rather light a candle than complain about darkness, we got a hose out. We hosed it down. We had a couple of days for it to dry. And then I looked at the chairs, and they were also really dusty. So we had lots of helpers. We got wet cloths. We started cleaning the dust off the chairs. That could be done. But then I saw the 10 VIP chairs. And this is no exaggeration. Of those 10 chairs, not one of those chairs had legs the same length. They all wobbled a lot. And that was just too much. You could wipe down the chairs, you can hose down the tent, but you can't fix those wobbly chairs. And so I ran to the phone, in the room over here, and I managed to catch the manager, the lady I talked to, as she was closing the office late on Friday afternoon. And I said, look, this is what you've delivered. Don't you remember I asked for the best? We've got the Governor of Western Australia and his wife coming. We can't have them falling over because the chairs aren't the right length, or they've got legs the wrong size, they're not equal sizes. And the lady was very apologetic and said, look, there must be some mistake. I'll get them changed immediately. Thank you. But what happened was this. The men had already knocked off for the weekend. They were down at the pub, starting their evening drinking, when the manager came in and said, the Buddhists need some new chairs. Get back to work. So you can imagine how they felt. But this time I was waiting for them just in front of the building here. And as that truck turned the corner, it came halfway down Nansen Way. You know what I'm talking about, just from Constant Street to this, where was it, about 200 metres? Halfway, a man jumped out of the truck. It must still be going 20, 30 kilometres an hour. He jumped up and came running towards us with his fist clenched. "Where's the bloke in charge? I want the bloke in charge!" So I went up to him and said, "I'm the bloke in charge." And his eyes were red, just like the monsters in the Jataka tales of Buddhists. And you could smell just on his breath how much beer he'd been drinking. And I sniffed it in. That's the most beer I've ever imbibed in 34 years as a monk. Coming from his breath. And his fist was right in front of my nose, like this. And everybody stopped what they were doing. They stopped all the work and they just looked. Not one of them came to help me. Thanks a lot. They didn't need to. Because it's amazing, when you're a meditator, when you know what to do, it's so easy not to be violent. What I did was just make my mind really peaceful, not at all afraid or scared. And I just looked him in the eye, peacefully, kindly. It's one of those amazing experiences in my life as a monk. He had his fist this far from my nose, breathing all this alcohol into me, red eyes, but he could go no further. Because I wasn't reacting in the normal way, his brain basically fused. It did. He didn't know what to do next. And it's one of those moments where you had him completely in your control and power. He couldn't go backwards, he couldn't go forwards. And it's a wonderful experience holding a person like that. Just because you were peaceful and you were kind, and he was completely confused. Now, in that 3 or 4 minutes, when I held him there, it wasn't just a couple of seconds, it was quite a long time. The truck had parked, and one of the other, probably the boss of the gang, came out and walked towards us and put his hand on this guy's shoulder and said, "Come on, let's unload the chairs." And I said, "Yes, I'll help you." And we unloaded those chairs together. That's how a Buddhist deals with violence. When you're not afraid, when you're kind, when you know how to make your mind very peaceful, you become invulnerable. No one can hit you or harm you. It's amazing the sort of power and the different decisions which you can make, or rather the range of possibilities when you've trained your mind a little bit. So sometimes you have the decision, should you run away? Should you fight? Pause a little. There may be a third option. Things which you've never thought of before. When you're very, very peaceful and calm, those decisions just come up by themselves. Different ways of dealing with life. And it's not the what, but the how. Because I was peaceful, because I was kind, it was the how which really